Thanks very much. Can I just double check you can hear me? So a bit of a thumbs up at the back. Lovely. Great. Well, thank you very much for attending today. I want to give you a point of view from Infinity. We really see the data center marketplace as a really changing environment at the moment, and we really feel that we've got a really strong role to play in that. We've got a number of slides that I'm going to take you through. So it really breaks down into 3 chapters. So the great opportunity that we see existing, particularly in the UK data center market, the growing importance of IT and how it's changing different industries. The problem though, so it's not just about turning up, building fantastic mechanical, electrical data center facilities. It's about truly understanding the client need and understanding what they're going to be doing within the facility and aligning the data center solution to that. And then finally, what Infinity are intent on doing about it. So we have some product offerings we're going to be talking to you about today that we've recently launched to the marketplace. So we've got a few slides here that we're not particularly focused on text. We're going to be taking you on a journey through our opinion on the marketplace. And the first thing we want to do is touch on a couple of industries that are really changing the way in which people are thinking about IT, transforming the enterprise experience of IT by understanding what consumers are using IT for and how they're changing different marketplaces. And the first one to focus on is retail. So well documented, the transformation of the high streets. And you see today, 1 in 6 high street stores, actually shop fronts are closed. So you've got high streets really changing the way in which they're trying to draw consumers in. The likes of John Lewis are thinking about, well, what do people physically have to go to stores for? And actually, how can we let them do business with us without coming to a store? And you look at the emergence of proximity retail, and you start to see the likes of Asda using the London Underground network to have refrigerated lockers so that you can order your food at lunchtime at work and pick up your food on the way home via your tube stop because you're not going to be either at home or available to get to the store to receive your food. And likewise, you've got the likes of Amazon who are starting to deploy lockers around central London and other locations, whereby you can look at 1 hour turnaround time from point of delivery either online or via the proximity solution. And the point we're trying to make here is that what used to be high street retail, dominated by advertising, marketing approaches, sales offers, trying to drag footfall into a store, is actually an industry dominated by IT. So those that are winning and losing in their marketplaces are those that have invested in their IT solutions. They understand exactly how the layers of those IT solutions are required to work. And those that are investing in competitive edge using technology are those that are winning in those marketplaces. The next area to focus on is smart homes. So we're thinking about the role of the data center in relation to how machine to machine is evolving. So I think, according to Cisco, 2008, the number of machine users of the data center started to exceed the number of human users of a data center. And if we think about the amount of IP addresses that exist on the planet now, you have this exponential growth that machine users of the data center are causing to happen. And you start to think about the evolution of our physical data center, so the facility, and how it's changed over the course of the last 5-10 years. And I think a lot of operators are focused on more efficiency, more cheaper and more economic build, working through effectively a commodity cycle that starts to reduce price and drive the same data center outcome for a little bit cheaper for the client. When you start to think about machine to machine, that's just not good enough. So you start to think about the smart home and IP addresses emerging in fridges, in ovens, in boilers, and people starting to be able to do things much more capable than the data center of 2005 and 2008. Yet the facility, the property isn't changing. We're just getting smarter, cheaper, more economic, and Infinity doesn't think that's good enough. And a particular wacky example you can think of is there's a company in Holland who are called Sparked. They're putting wireless devices on cows. They're tracking whether these cows are sick or if they're pregnant. And each cow is generating 200 megabits of data a year. And that's been processed through a data center in Amsterdam into both the agriculture owners, but also the universities to understand how we can dynamically change the agricultural industry. You start to think 5 years ago, we never would have thought about the role of a data center serving farms. We never would have thought about the role of the data center serving the fridge makers, the oven makers, those people like HMV who were all they were worried about was expanding shops to fit more CDs in it. The world is changing. Genuinely, you can see industry by industry that IT is starting to dominate. So those forward-thinking industries that caused change years ago, so the logistics manufacturers, oil and gas and pharmaceutical, they're moving on leaps and bounds and creating massive consumer change. But there's also industries out there that are starting to see this change. And you see the gambling and gaming industry really dominated by tech leaders now. And you see the parallel of people like Betfair who are entering new marketplaces and changing the game. And then you look at Ladbrokes, who haven't quite invested heavily in technology, and they haven't quite, taken on the charge that Betfair did by introducing their technology platforms. And Ladbrokes have issued 3 profit warnings in the last 18 months. Industry by industry, you're seeing IT being the reason why people win and lose. So you might say, what a wonderful scene for the data center. So as IT becomes more important, you start to see the role of the data center layer, the facility, supporting the compute infrastructure, and what's not to like? We should just sit back and serve those users of enterprise IT and wait for the money to roll in. But we really do have a problem, in our opinion. Our industry is dominated by property operators. So we talk about leases. We talk about indexation of costs every single year. We talk about a landlord and tenant relationship. We stick people into big lumps of space with fixed lumps of power, and we don't give them flexibility to react when their IT environment's changing. We really need to think of the enterprise user of IT and the journey that CIO is on. So the CIO today doesn't have a determined path. He has many, many challenges that he is facing into. He's gone from the administrative function of the business of 15, 20 years ago. 10 years ago, he was the guy who was responsible for automation that enabled cost cutting. Now the CIO is the guy who's responsible for revenue generation, responsible for growth, responsible for entering new marketplaces. And there is no telling what IT infrastructure needs to evolve into in that type of dynamic. Infinity strongly believes that we need to create a data center facility that's capable of understanding the needs of the enterprise user of IT, and the data center facility becomes known as a component of the IT solution, not the place where it resides. So we're just going to give a little bit of perspective of the journey that the enterprise CIO is on, very much from the facilities-based data center perspective. So, as I say, 20 years ago, or today, depending on the type of organization you are, on-premise legacy IT exists. Now, this is the world where IT is the administrative function. It keeps billing moving, it keeps payroll going out the door, it keeps the lights on, and the inventory system still exists, and you can fix it and develop it when you need to. But IT exists in the same place where people are. It's not replicated, it's not diverse, and people are using IT on their premise. 10 years ago, you start to see a bit of fear emerging. So post certain global events such as 9/11, you start to see the want for business continuity and disaster recovery. So enterprises are taking their IT and they're positioning it into diverse, resilient data centers, and there's a boom in our marketplace. And what a fantastic time that we all had the opportunity to build fantastic facilities, massive supply coming onto the marketplace, a number of new investors start to come into the data center environment because enterprises, financial services organizations, service providers, telcos, they all start to create this dual diverse data center environment, which is massive boom on our marketplace. Everything's replicated, everything's delivered at least once, if not twice, and the enterprise has a chance to fail applications over from one data center to the other. All of a sudden, something happened, and the opportunity for virtualization existed. So mid-2000s, really proliferating to today. When virtualization hit the data center market at our end, the facilities end really changed. So virtualization punished those who'd made long-term commitments on data centers. So those in the early 2000s who had taken on that business continuity position, they'd built 2 data centers, they'd built 200% of capacity, and all of a sudden virtualization gives the opportunity to get more IT out of less data center, and all of a sudden you have massive capacity that's stranded. Actual capacity that's enough to cope with the huge data boom that's occurred in the last few years. And you see a marketplace where demand is actually relatively low compared to the exponential growth of data consumption. Then you see complexity added to that marketplace. So not only is the virtualization opportunity yielding, you're also seeing the emergence of a number of managed service operations. You're seeing the emergence of various cloud platforms in the public environment that start to exist. And I reference here multi-sourced IT. So it's not just the IT department now who are purchasing IT. You see the marketing officer buying Salesforce.com. You see the guy in finance buying a billing cycle from AWS. And all of a sudden, the CIO's lost control. He's in this environment where he is held responsible for the growth of the business, but he doesn't have control on supply, cost, quality of the IT solution that's been deployed. Yet he's absolutely, in the chair and responsible for the outcomes. And this really is the position where we see the mass of enterprises today, so still trying to drive that virtualization opportunity and having this proliferation of IT around them that they can't get their hands around, and they really, really need to control it to be able to harness the opportunity. And it's in particular this dilemma that Infinity wants to face into. So accepting that the CIO is on this journey and will be at any stage of maturity, we need an offer that makes them capable to be able to drive their business outcome. It needs to be flexible because they don't know what their end state will be, but it needs to scale up and scale down as their requirements change. And in particular, this virtualization point. So we don't want to wait for enterprises to have completed their virtualization journey before they start to try and migrate their data center. We want to take them on that journey, and we want to make them capable within our facilities and evolve with them. So the world that most enterprises will end up in, a very simple diagram, but the software-defined data center. A private cloud in the center, and the opportunity all of a sudden through orchestration and automation tools for the CIO all of a sudden to start to grab hold of controlling the IT environments. So all of a sudden, from this central core, you're able to determine how a Salesforce license gets populated and how many licenses you have, how the image on your virtual desktop appears at day one of the new employee's day in the office through their thin client desktop. And all of a sudden, the CIO starts to garner some control. He starts to bring in his budget, and he starts to be able to make a plan to develop their business to grow in the marketplace that they're trying to disrupt. And I think really importantly, there's no doubt today you've heard a lot about the software-defined data center, and I think it's one of those phenomenons that perhaps is misunderstood. So much like the cloud washing and use, wrongful use of the word cloud and big data. Actually, loads of people use the phrase software-defined data center, but they rarely mean the data center. So the facility that the IT and the compute all resides within. And Infinity is determined to make itself relevant to that software data center, which we'll talk to. So if we see this journey, we're trying to position ourselves so that we can take the enterprise CIO on this full journey end to end and make relevant offers at various stages of their evolution to make sure that they get the right value out of their data center, but they aren't burdened by a landlord and tenant relationship, which requires them to commit to 5 or 10 years worth of capacity in order to get a decent price. So we're going to be talking about 3 principles in a couple of slides. So the first one is, when you're transforming, creating an agile or flexible approach to how you consume space or power. The second is introducing a utility offer to the data center space, which we call burst. And then finally, living up to the comments around software data center, creating this dynamic platform that's capable of direction from the IT layer. This is what we call the infinite data center, which will be one of our product portfolios that we offer to the marketplace. So as I say, Agile, the first proposition within the infinite data center. Now this is for customers who are transforming their IT estates. They're introducing new technologies and they need to land those technology platforms before they can retire the old. And we give them a data center platform where they can scale up and scale down, rack by rack should they wish, or hall by hall should they wish, but they're not bound by a contractual term. We allow them scale up, scale down to 0 kilowatts should they wish, and we manage a contract structure around that. Secondly, burst, so our utility data center offering for those enterprises who have sets of infrastructure where they can predict the utilization. They're expecting not to use the full capacity that they would cater for, so we only charge them for the amount of power they consume. However, we provision them the top layer of power, and then we charge them upon consumption when they burst through their forecasted level. And then finally, dynamic. So this is our forward-looking position where Infinity becomes the leader in the UK market for facilities-based software data center. Now this is all about creating tools and assets within the data center that are capable of receiving direction from the IT layer. So for example, a software-defined power offering. So capability to be able to allow the IT layer to decide what level of resilience on their power infrastructure they require day to day. So a billing application. For 2 days a month, they'll require a tier 3 data center offering to make sure that their billing cycle runs and is resilient. For 28 days a month, they're more than happy to take a tier 1 data center offering and pay the reduced fee as a result of it. We're going to be introducing tools to the marketplace that allow enterprises, and in particular automation and orchestration, to make these choices. And the 4 offerings within the dynamic offer: high availability, so a tier 3 data center asset, those that Infinity and others are famous for, but somewhat ubiquitous in the marketplace today. A high density offering which is capable of temporary or permanent use, but a resource platform ready for consumption, ready for big data analytics, either on a project or a permanent basis. Economy, so what I've touched on before, so flexible infrastructure that gives the enterprise the choice when they want a tier 1 asset and when they want a tier 3 asset. And then finally, a library of service provider offerings, so where we have cloud platforms, managed service providers that can offer incremental service to the base offering that the enterprise has purchased from Infinity, giving them the capability to trade Infinity contracted spend with service provider contracted spend and developing an ecosystem. So thank you very much for listening to us today. This is the first of a series of engagements we're doing with the marketplace. This really is a point of view based around a product. We'd really be delighted to speak to both other service providers and the supply chain, should they wish to get involved in this type of movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed, Andrew. We have time for a couple of questions, please. Any questions? Please, there is one question over here. Thank you.
Yeah, hi there.
Hi there.
Do you see your hardware, what you're actually building, changing to accommodate this sort of service offering, or do you think you can do that within your existing portfolio?
So let me just double check I heard the question. So do we see our hardware evolving as a result of this offer?
Yeah, what you're actually building or due to build.
I assume when you talk about hardware, you talk about the mechanical electrical infrastructure.
Yes.
Yeah. So I see us making demands on our mechanical electrical supply chain to evolve with us. So the type of controls, the use of DCIM style tools, in my opinion, exist to manage an efficient data center. I don't think they exist in order to give an enterprise user of IT a view of the facility that they can then react to, automate and orchestrate. So I'd like to see the supply chain working with us in order to evolve that data center component to genuinely be software defined. So we're working with a number of DCIM providers at the moment, looking at how we can take what is a wonderful management tool, an insight tool, and how we can actually generate real-time controls, real-time access from the enterprise into the data center, and really give control out on a confined basis to the enterprise's infrastructure, and bring it up to service level rather than infrastructure level.
There's one question over there, and then one over here as well afterwards, please.
Mike Kelly. Andy, are you envisaging, I mean, if you've got a situation where a client is dual fed with UPS on both sides, are you envisaging a situation where you either overcommit UPS or that the UPS becomes configurable according to the software definition? Is that the sort of thing you have in mind?
Yeah, so near term, we're talking about overcommitment. So Infinity trying to create a marketplace whereby we provision tier 3 assets and we trial through proof of concepts the ability within a tier 3 asset for an enterprise to control commercially their outcome. Long term, I think it's placing demands, working with partners within the supply chain to really make them evolve to become software defined. But I do see it as a absolute evolution. So the marketplace doesn't exist today, and we really need to work together to create it.
Excellent. Thank you. Andrew, one more question here, please.
Last year in the United States, there has been a trend for mega deals for the wholesale data center providers from Rackspace, I'd say Twitter.
Yeah.
Do you see the same trend going into European markets next year?
I think really good point. If I just refer back to one of these pictures. So we've seen the wholesale market change quite dramatically over the course of the last probably 5 years. To our mind, wholesale describes a marketplace where really it's just large users of data centers rather than users of data centers who then sell to someone else. But to our minds, wholesale data centers today really are dominated by service providers and service providers only, and those that hold content and really serve the mass market. And really we're starting to see financial services organizations that used to be big in those marketplaces start to dissipate. And the reason for that, we think, is in this journey. So as enterprises either have committed to very long terms, very large space and power, and then are on a journey to virtualize and consolidate, they're getting more IT out of less data center, but they're also using their supply chain effectively. So as they're multi-sourcing, their demand starts to go into different regions. And really it's only the large aggregators of data that really consume wholesale size data centers. So really where we see wholesale is the outer portion of this circle. So the Amazons, the Salesforce, the Microsoft dominating infrastructure, platform and software, very much being the consumers of that marketplace. But that's a global market. So we really need to question whether the UK becomes a net importer of cloud traffic or a net exporter of cloud traffic. And really that marketplace really sinks or swims as a result. We do believe there is good reason for private clouds and the orchestration and automation tools to sit within the enterprise so they can dictate how they're controlled. Now, even if this is just a small central cluster that garners control in the public cloud, we do think that central cluster should sit within the enterprise. So we see that our direct end user business sits within that private cloud, and Infinity's ambition is to become the home of the enterprise private cloud in the UK market.
Excellent. Right, just one final, really very short question, Andrew, please, after this sort of very fascinating, stimulating lecture. We all know that data centers really is the factory of generating digital data. But at the same time, obviously, as you know, we all concerned about the sustainability aspects. That's really from environmental, economical, and social, really, dimensions. So where are you in terms of your data centers, and how conscious your data centers from a sustainability point of view?
Yeah, so very good question. So we're extremely proud of the environmental solutions that we build. So we often focus on every data center, can it be leading, if not bleeding edge, in terms of the environmental impact that it has? Now, one particular point of view we have is the use of PUE as a statistic within the marketplace, and how potentially it's misunderstood by the enterprise and misused by the operator community. So, we've been guilty of this in the past, but a number of our competitors and friends are also guilty of using these extremely low PUEs, unwilling to contractually cap to them, and actually unable to achieve those PUEs within the true enterprise use of IT, where actually the reality of 100% IT utilisation is an extremely rare scenario. So my counsel to an enterprise user of IT when seeing a data centre contract and understanding the impact of a market-leading PUE in inverted commas is to truly understand your utilisation rates and the actual PUE at that level of performance, and is the operator confident enough to back that with a contract. So in our instance, in every case, we absolutely are. Now, in terms of sustainability and drive, we've seen a number of initiatives over the years where the marketplace is trying to drive environmental benefits to the end user, and invariably, albeit CSR is becoming more important within enterprises, actually at the scale of purchase in the wholesale markets, you start to see enterprises shy away from the benefit of that sustainability. But we also genuinely feel like there is a need for a central body within the data center community to actually start to drive standards and performance.
Absolutely.
Now, ultimately, in today's marketplace, the data center operators are resellers of energy infrastructure and resellers of utility. Yet, we sit adjacent to the energy marketplace with no negative or positive benefit from the regulation that exists within that marketplace. And we see ourselves beholden to CRC, governmental style changes, but also, unforecastable base energy costs. And when we start thinking about the global market that is the data center market, the UK market will sink or swim subject to that utility performance, subject to regulation that sits and doesn't protect the data center industry. So
Brilliant.
We're really keen to lobby on that basis.
Very comprehensive and persuasive answer, I must say. Thank you, Andrew. Ladies and gentlemen, please, if you'd like to join me to show your appreciation to Andrew Roughan from Infinity for his very interesting talk.